As you might have guessed from the thumbnail and the title of this video, I'm going to be ranking all of the fantasy YA novels that I read as a teenager. Some of them not as a teenager, but we will get onto that. So these are the categories that I have made. This is my tier list of all the ones that I myself have read. My S tier is no mourners, no funerals, because obviously that kind of tells you what's going to go in there, but also just, it's a good quote. It's a good quote. Some of them are quotes, some of them are not quotes. The next one is all the stories are true. Again, a foreshadowing of what might be in this category. I don't know what else is going to be, but I know one of the books from that series is going to be in that. So I've named it that, and I have some confessions to make about the fact that I like that series. The third one is Bella, Where Have You Been, Loca? If you've been on Twitter, if you've been on TikTok, you know where that's from. And again, another quote, another telling you what's gonna be in there. And then the next one is Chin Up, Princess, Your Tiara is Falling. I was a teenager in 2014, 2015, 2013 even. And actually, no, it wasn't. I wasn't a teenager in 2013. This was a very popular quote at the time. This was like one of those Pinterest quotes that you would get on like sparkly background with that sort of like calligraphy writing. And I just thought that felt really all-consuming for the type of books some of these are. And then the last one was I was 14. Sometimes I wasn't. Sometimes I was 17. Sometimes I was 12. Sometimes I was 21. So some of them are a little bit more ridiculous than the others. Okay, but we'll start off strong. We'll start off with Twilight because, I mean, what else would we start with if not Twilight? One of the biggest. But this was like the first YA book that I think I read. And to be honest, it's really odd the story I have with it because my English teacher told me to read it. What an odd guy. Like, he was some dude being like, I was like, we used to have this thing where we had to learn how libraries were. Like, we had to learn how to use the library. It was like a big part of like research and understanding the Dewey Decimal System. So we used to like take time out of our English lessons to go to the library and like get taught how the library worked. I don't know, man. It was weird. And one of the things that we used to do is also have to like pick up a book that we had to read. And he was like, you should read Twilight. What a guy. Like, what a dude. What was going on there? But yeah, going into Bella, Where Have You Been, Loca? Because the Bella in this is obviously the namesake for the category. The next one we have is Throne of Glass. Okay, I read this of my own volition. No one told me to read this except for the BookTube girlies from the years 2015 to about 2019. And also the TikTok girlies, they're only on this. I've read all of Throne of Glass. So I read the ending of the series when I was like 17. So I was really reading these. Like, I was waiting for the last maybe 4 books. I think when I started reading them, Heir of Ash. No, what the hell is the third one called? Heir of Fire. Yeah, Heir of Fire had come out and I read the first 2. Bad of Midnight literally put me in a 2-year-long reading slump until I finally read it, and then I got onto Heir of Fire. And then I think I read Queen of Shadows immediately. So by the time I read Heir of Fire, that one had come out. Anyway, this entire series is ridiculous and I'm like the person to go to if you want to know what happens in the series. I'm not going to make a video recapping what it's about because I can't entirely remember, and I would rather like eat my own flesh than read these again. So yeah, it's definitely one of those series where it's like Sarah J Maas had no idea where this was going. She got to the end of the 3rd book and then she realized that from what she had written in the 1st book, she should have wrapped it up in book 4. But she was like, actually, I think we should go somewhere else and make the pedophile the main love interest instead of the fucking king that was meant to be the love interest. It was such an odd book. What an odd book. What a stupid series. I think the main thing I have to say about this is it should have been split into 2 series, and then I would have just like not read the second half and been sad, because back in the day, I was never gonna let a series not finish. Okay, unless I'd only read the 1st book, it was completion. If I read the 2nd book, oh yeah, I was gonna get like, it doesn't matter if there was like 8 books in, I was gonna read that shit. This is definitely going into, I think I might put this in Chin Up, Princess, Your Tiara is Falling. I don't know, actually, maybe it should be going, because like I finished it. Like, I actually finished all of it. First half was good. Good is an overstatement. But like, I liked Manon, and that she only became a character in the 3rd book. And I liked Dorian. But like, what does that mean these days? This book was bad. And I hated the fairy stuff. The fairy stuff was so shit. I liked the assassin stuff much more. And you know what always pisses me off? We'll get to the thing that really pisses me off about assassins, is when they're not assassins, and we'll get to that. That might go down. It might go down. The next one is Daughter of Smoke and Bone. Okay. This was probably is still one of the best like fantasy YA novels that I've read to this day. And I think that's just because Laini Taylor is a very good writer. I think about the angel, not fallen angel, angel in this story at least every 3 months, okay? I read this book when I was like 15 years old. I am 22. I still think about the angel from time to time. It's also one of the first things that I read that was like high fantasy-esque. Like, it's not. It's still set in modern day Prague, but then there's like a portal dimension where you go through, and then there's like all these animals, not animals, they are animals, but they're like animal people who all have magic. And I just remember like really liking it. I thought the idea was really original and the writing was good. And I think I also listened to this with the audiobook. I think this was like the first ever audiobook I ever listened to. Must have been this book. But yeah, I think I'm going to put this in All the Stories Are True. I don't... actually, no. It's going to go into No Mourners, No Funerals. It's very good. Like, it's an excellent series. And it's definitely one where I'm like, I think I need to reread this at least once in my life, because as much as I don't read YA anymore, and we'll get to why I don't read YA anymore, this was something I read when I was of the age of like people who should be reading this. I remember really liking it. Other people who have reread it and stuff in the recent years also really like it, so it's definitely up there for me. The next one is Vampire Academy. Okay, again, this is another one. I've read all of them, okay? I feel like people make all these videos where they're like reading the Vampire Academy, or like reading old YA novels to see how bad they are or whatever. But I was really like riding the wave with this. I was reading all of them. And I have to say, one of the main things I remember about this is that this story has no conclusion, because the one thing that they fight the whole way through, they don't defeat. And I remember that pissing me the fuck off when I was reading this book, because I was like, you go through this whole thing, you figure out how to fight your enemy, and then you don't actually do anything to get rid of them. So I was just like, this is so dumb. Plus the like love triangle in this was bad. And then also the main love interest in this was boring, and he was evil at one point. It was a mess. But I just don't know where I'm gonna put this, because I'm like, I liked it. I think I might put this in Chin Up, Princess, Your Tiara Is Falling. Okay, so another confession to make. I read this Vampire Academy, and then I also read the spin-off series. And there were also 5 books in that series, and I read all of them. Okay, to be fair, both of these series had books that were quite short. I think they were all like 300 and something pages, like 320 pages. It's not a very long book for a fantasy novel, especially like as a series of fantasy novels. Like the end books didn't get much longer either, so it was pretty consistent throughout to read these. I'm gonna say that Bloodlines, was it better? Was it better? Was it really better? The love interest in this is the second guy from the old love triangle in the Vampire Academy. And he's the person I actually wanted the character from the Vampire Academy to get with. So to see him become the main love interest in this and have good chemistry with the main character is pretty good. And they had good like banter. Plus they were on like a secret mission. This was like an entire thing about them going on a secret mission away from the vampire world, so they could like keep somebody like safe or something. And somehow that ballooned into like 5 books. The one thing I liked about this was that she had powers. Well, she wasn't a vampire, but she had powers, and she had to like really learn how to use her powers. And I thought that was interesting, because in like all of the other series, usually they just sort of like really rapidly like learn all their powers, and they're great and they're amazing and they're so good at what they do. But in this, it was like, actually, she had to learn, and she was learning in like increments that made her feel better, and like those things are really interesting. And I think that's like a good part of world building that is like missed out upon in all these books, because people just want their like main character to be like powerful as soon as possible. And it's just like, if they're not powerful in the beginning of the book, they can't immediately be powerful like halfway through. That's just not how training should work. Okay, I'm gonna put this in Bella Where Have You Been, Lyca, because I liked the main character and the love interest, and generally I remember it being okay. I remember like flying through these books. Shadow and Bone. I don't know where to put this, because I don't want to put it in No Mourners, No Funerals, because it's definitely not as good as No Mourners, No Funerals. But I don't even know if I've finished the last book. Okay, so I have to say, I don't know if I loved this book that much. This series was not the best. I've definitely read better. And it was very like basic. I remember something that really pissed me off about this was just like how good Alina was immediately, as I said from the last one. It's just, she found out about her powers, she was super powerful immediately, she's great and everyone loves her. And it's just like, shut up. You're reading from her perspective. She's very naive and she doesn't make good decisions at any point until like the very end, I guess. And it's like, it really feels like you're sludging through the second book and the third book even. Like the first book is decent, like you do go through that pretty rapidly, especially since you don't know stuff about the Darkling. But right now, I think I'm gonna put Shadow and Bone also in. Bella, where have you been, Loca? Okay, well, we know where the next one's going. Six of Crows. Obviously, I love Six of Crows. Everyone loves Six of Crows. Everyone loves this series. Everyone loves the Crows. And it is great. Can I tell you anything that happened in this book? It would be difficult. It would be difficult, I can't lie. I have not read it in a very long time, but I love the series. I love the characters. I loved the show. And I'm really sad that we're not going to get the Crows on screen, especially since the cast are very good. I don't really care for the show too much since the budget was insanely small, but what they did with the budget was crazy, honestly. Like when I think about how small the budget for that show is and the fact that they were able to ram both book 2 and 3 of Shadow and Bone into one season, that was good. I think they did well. Was it the best season? Was it the best written season? Was it the best acted season? No. But did it exist? Was it decent? Did they do better than anyone expected them to do? All yes. So for that reason, I liked the show. But that was a tangent. Six of Crows on top. Great writing. Great, like, just generally everything was great. I liked where we were going with everything. I liked what we were learning from everyone. And I liked the heists. I like the world that we built here because obviously Shadow and Bone is very much like the court. But here we're in this like weird back alleyway gang setting. Like when I read this, I'm pretty sure for so much of it, I was just picturing like a de-aged Cillian Murphy playing Tommy Shelby as Kaz Brekker. Like I kept being like, stop picturing him, he's old. And then I just wouldn't. I was like back in 2016 or whatever, when I was like first watching Peaky Blinders. I remember I read this a couple weeks afterwards and I was just like, he was in my brain. But now I only really picture Freddie Carter, really. Like I don't picture anyone else by him. Which is so nice because they're casted so well. And the next one is King of Scars. So I've read all of them, okay? I am a big Grishaverse girly. Plus I'm a big Nikolai girly. Like I didn't really care about Alina or Mal. Like I don't really care about them. I didn't want her to pick Nikolai. I didn't really want her to pick the Darkling either because I'm not insane. And I did like Mal the most. But here I have to say, like Nikolai just blows them all out of the water. And Zoya, as somebody who doesn't like it when a character is just picked out of nowhere and becomes the queen and is like really beloved because they have special powers that they didn't know about before and they're really good at them. I'm a big Zoya defender because obviously in the first book she's like, but everyone loves me, I'm the best. And then this like new girl comes in and waltzes in and she's like, but I'm amazing. And she's like, no, but I'm not, I feel really bad, but everyone loves you anyway. And I'm like, shut up. This person who's been training their entire life, like their life has been upturned by your presence. Shut up. And I know that Alina had really big issues to worry about, but like, do I care? No. So I love Zoya. I loved this series. I think the ending of King of Scars is a little bit unserious, especially since we haven't heard any updates of whether this was going to get a sequel, because it definitely ends off in a place where it's like, sequel, maybe sequel, could we perhaps get a sequel? And it's definitely where we're leaning towards, but I haven't heard anything about that since Leigh Bardugo is still writing the Alex Hellbent Ninth House series. So I don't know where we're going from here. But also I really liked King of Scars. I think I'm gonna put it in all, I don't know. Yeah, I think I'm gonna put it in All Stories Are True because I really liked that this dealt with the fallout of the war. I don't feel like a lot of like series or books or shows or stories at all really look at the aftermath of the war, because like we do the war and the war ends. What happens afterwards? Here, you know, when we end Shadow and Bone, we leave Nikolai in a really weird state. We leave the entirety of Ravka in a really weird state. So looking at the aftermath of war and whatever happens in Shadow and Bone and really like having to piece together like peace treaties and understanding how like Ravka was kind of come back together was really interesting. I don't love the royalty stuff though. I don't know if they're going to go towards democracy. I'm not sure if that's where this is leading or if it's not. So we'll see if we get a sequel. The next one is The Poppy War. So I really like The Poppy War. I read this recently. So this is not one that I read when I was like younger. This is something that is very fresh in my mind. And I really liked it. I think the ending is perhaps hopeless, you know, like it feels really sad. And I don't know if the story that this is telling needs a really sad ending. I also really just didn't know where this was going in the end. Like it felt like it was taking ages to get to the end, and that was really annoying. But I really liked the second story for doing that same meandering thing, where it was like, where are we going? What are we doing? What are the decisions the main characters are making? Who's evil? Who's not evil? I liked having to figure those things out, and I don't think this suffered too much with book 2 syndrome. I think at the time I think it did, but now I don't. I think The Poppy War is still the strongest out of the three of them, especially since, you know, we go from this whole like training stuff, and then we go to being in war, and then like understanding and fighting the war, to like having to pick sides after a war. Like, it's not just one war, right? It's like a consistent battle, and that was really interesting, and it was really well written. But I do think that the hopelessness stuff does put it down for me. And I think she rectifies that a little bit with Babel. I think Babel has a more uplifting ending. So I'm going to put this in No Mourners, No Funerals. But it could be at the top of all the stories are true. I don't know if I loved The Poppy War. Because like part of the way through, I was just like, this is really, really long. And I don't know if we needed every single thing that was in this story. We're going in with my big one. I'm doing my big one, and that is obviously the Shadowhunter Chronicles. I've read everything. And there's like stuff on here that I've not put in because I've read like all of it. It's my guilty pleasure, and you know what? I've said a lot about it in my like Chain of Thorns video. I like the series. Is the incest odd? Yes. Does she overuse the same tropes? Yes. Am I on the verge of not reading any of her books anymore? Yes. But that doesn't stop me from the fact that I've read all of them at this point, and there will be sequels, and I will read them too, because she has been kind of teasing these sequels for years, and I am a sucker for a teaser. If something is teased in a series that I've read, I'm gonna keep reading. I'm sorry, like if that's how you do the marketing for the next book, I'm gonna read it. Like you've got me. Okay, give me the backlinks. I will be like, oh my god, I know what's happening because she said this in this book and that book, and like back 3 books ago, we found out that this happened, and I'm like, yeah, like that kind of thing. I'm the person. I'm, you can tell that I'm a Taylor Swift fan, can't you? I don't love all of them the same amount. I think some of them I really don't like, whereas like some of them I really like. So the Mortal Instruments is going into all the stories are true. Like that one is obviously something that I have a lot of nostalgia for. I read them when I was 12, all the way up to when I was like 13. They ended really quickly, but like I really liked them. I really like all the main characters. I like the side characters. Like I don't love Clary and Jace as much. They were really annoying. Obviously the incest stuff, they have a lot of miscommunication going on, and that was really annoying. But all the other characters like Simon and Izzy and Magnus and Hodge, and even the parents and Luke, and just like other people in the series, Santiago, Lily Chen, people like that, very interesting to read in my opinion. And they have me in a chokehold, and I'm not gonna like say that I don't love them. I do. I have not reread them, to be fair, but I like, from what I remember, I really did like them. Okay, Infernal Devices. I'm gonna put this in Chilla, Princess, your tiara is falling. I don't really care about this. A lot of people like this a bit more. I think people think this is better written, and that's valid. I can't really talk to that. I read it a very long time ago, but I read this before I was really into period dramas, and therefore I have like less of a favorable opinion on this, because I'm like, well, it was okay, but I don't really care about it. Plus, I really didn't like Tessa, who is the main character, and she gets with Will, who I didn't want her to get with. I wanted her to get with Jem, who's the other main like guy, and I definitely stand by the fact that if Cassandra Clare at this point had been doing polyamory, they would have been a polyamorous couple. But she doesn't start doing polyamory until The Dark Artificers, which is the next series. So, like, there's a lot of issues with that. And I also don't remember, like, loving the plot. It was about this, like, mechanical army of, like, robots or whatever. And it was just like, whatever, who cares? Lady Midnight, this one's a bit better. I think this one has a better plot. The characters are very interesting in this, as opposed to the Infernal Devices, but they're not as good as the Mortal Instruments characters. I think this one, where there's a lot of issues with the parents, there's a lot of issues with the family, and each character I think is constructed really well. I think all of the characters, as in the main female leads of each of her series, are always well written in a way that makes them very different from all of the other main female leads. And I think that's good. I can fault her for a lot of things, and the main things I fault her for are the overuse of miscommunication in her books, especially since it doesn't need to happen. But writing-wise, I don't think she's that bad. Like, I think she has something going for her, and that's why she's such a prolific writer, and, this world is very interesting, but, she over-relies on one thing, and that's really annoying. And that's why Chain of Gold is going into, I was 14. Did I start reading this when I was like 20 years old? No, I think that's 19. No, when did Chain of Gold come out? Oh my god, I might have been 19 years old. Anyway, well, I'm going to put it in I was 14 because it's definitely one of the worst, because the main characters in this are the children of the people in the Infernal Devices series, okay? So we know those people, and they don't ask them for help, and you're like, why not? Why don't we just ask the parents for help? There's not enough understanding of why the miscommunication happens in this series, as opposed to like Lady Midnight, where we're like, there are no adults. Like, we can't ask anyone for help. So that's why we're struggling. Whereas like in this, I'm just like, none of the problems are problems. The next one being Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. So this is from Fangirl, the book, which is also a book by Rainbow Rowell. And the main character in that book writes fanfiction of a series that is essentially just Harry Potter. And she writes essentially what is Drarry fanfiction of people in the fake Harry Potter. And this is the fanfiction of that. Like, it's the fanfiction she's writing, but it's not the same as the one that she's writing in the novel, because in the novel we actually get excerpts from the fanfiction, which is odd. I thought that was really weird, and I didn't like those scenes as opposed to the scenes about the actual girl who was a fangirl. But yeah, this was good. Like, I liked this series. I thought it was decent, but it was more like if Harry was dating Sirius, but it wasn't like the age gap. It was just like if Sirius was a character in Harry Potter and was like Harry's age. But also if Sirius was like fan Sirius, not like Sirius from the books, like fandom Sirius, basically. I don't remember exactly like the plot points in this. I read this kind of recently, like in the last like 4 years I probably read this. I don't have particularly fantastic things to say about this, but like it wasn't bad. Like, it definitely was not in any way bad. It was very entertaining. They were a very charismatic and interesting couple to read about. And it was a good story in that it was like if Harry Potter, the series, had less issues. It was like a lot of the stuff in Harry Potter is obviously quite heavy because we're following one specific thing. And you know how in like a lot of Harry Potter fanfictions, it's just like chill vibes. This was essentially just chill vibes. I don't read Harry Potter fanfiction, so I don't actually know if Harry Potter fanfiction is chill vibes. I only ever read Marauder fanfiction, so I can't tell. That was always like during the war. But I'm going to put it in Bella Where Have You Been Loca, because it was not a bad time. But I just can't remember exactly what happened because it wasn't the most interesting of time. Okay, the next thing I have is Mistborn. Mistborn is one of my favourite books, I think, ever. I don't love the ending of the series. Like, I think that definitely drags it down. I think the ending of the series is really rushed and really weird, and I really like it. I don't really understand why it went to the place that it did. I don't think it needed to. I think we could have gone with a much more solid ending, and we just didn't. The first 2 books I really love. The first book I think is literally one of my favourite books of all time. And for that, I think I'm going to have to put in All the Stories Are True. But the last book really, really drags for me. I don't like where we end up. I don't like the last thesis of the book. It feels really flat for me. It doesn't have anything to do with the sort of stance that we take at the beginning of the book, where we're like, oh my god, we need to fight people, we need to fight the system, which, you know, I love a good fight the system book. But by the end, we're just like, and we'll let God deal with it. And you're like, oh, so he's a Mormon. Like when I found out that Brandon Sanderson was a Mormon, I was like, oh my god, everything is clicking, everything is making sense, everything is opening up and making the world make sense to me. I feel like my third eye is opened. Because like there was definitely points when reading the last book in that series, I was like, what the fuck is going on? Why was this the decision that was made? But now I know why. But yeah, it's still very good. It's very well written. But I think the Mormonism thing really makes me think he's a bit of a freak, because like, who stays in the Mormon church? The Beautiful Creatures, that is the next one. Okay, Beautiful Creatures is like a Twilight knockoff. Like literally everything that happens in Twilight essentially happens in Beautiful Creatures. But I think Beautiful Creatures actually has better rounded characters. So it's about like evil witches. Essentially, when you come of an age, you either have to be a good witch or a bad witch, and you don't really get to choose. You just like are from like the innateness of yourself. I think you also like get to pick a little bit, like the Sorting Hat in Harry Potter, where you're like, yeah, but like I want to pick bad or I want to pick good a little bit. I think you get to choose, and I just remember it being very over the top. It was very dramatic. A lot of the miscommunication stuff that happens in Twilight, you know, when like in the second book, Edward runs away. Same thing happens here. There's a big battle in like the third book, and then in the fourth book, like everything gets resolved. But the characters in this were very well fleshed out, I think, in comparison to Twilight, where everyone feels a little bit wooden. And here, you know, we feel a little bit better about that. It's also like about the South and like fighting the British, I think. And that was like really random to me because I didn't understand that at all as like a 14-year-old. Like when I look back, I was like, okay, now I understand what a Confederate soldier is and why that's a bad thing. And I understand why Americans in the South would have thought like British people were a bad thing. But at the time I was so confused. I was like really trying to make this happen for myself, but I didn't. I'm gonna put this in Chin Up Princess because I do think this has a lot of issues. I don't remember a lot of the time it was a bit of a bore, but the characters were better than Twilight. But Twilight just remains prolific in a way Beautiful Creatures wasn't, you know? But Beautiful Creatures is so 2014. Like, it's such a remnant of that time that only people who were reading books like this at that time would read. Like, I don't know if anyone would tell you to pick up Beautiful Creatures in this day and age. The next one being Heroes of Olympus. So I don't put Percy Jackson on here because that's not YA, but I kind of consider Heroes of Olympus to be YA. It's the same way that the Poppy War and Mistborn are technically adult / young adult, but I put them in young adult. I think they very much skew lower. Like, the themes are interesting and a bit more adult, but I think that's why young adult, you know, it spans a wide amount of time. You know, it spans from about like 15 to like 20 essentially in the publishing world, and I think Poppy War and Mistborn kind of skew a little bit higher, whereas Heroes of Olympus obviously skews a bit lower, even though the characters in it are like 15, 16. So okay, some of them are like 13, but obviously it reads at middle grade level, so that's, you know, why it's a bit odd. But I'm going to put it in YA because I think it feels a bit more adult than Percy Jackson does. But I'm going to obviously put this in... Oh, actually no. Am I going to put this in No Mourners, No Funerals? Did I like it that much? You know what? For its mainstay in my life, I'm going to put it in No Mourners, No Funerals. I have such an insane relationship with this. I read it for a very long time. I had to like wait for Blood of Olympus to come out. I remember like reading it and buying it from Waterstones and just like loving it. I don't love it now. I don't like Blood of Olympus. I don't like the way it ended. It's really weird because like I really like the first 4 books. I really don't like the way it ended. It's another Mistborn situation where like the last book really screws over the rest of it because it just doesn't want to commit to being what it is at the beginning of the series. And that really bored me because I was like, I understand this is for children and therefore how much can I expect? But I was a child reading this and being like, the stakes are too low. Like, I was 12 or 13 reading this book. It wasn't like I was like super young and not understanding there shouldn't have been stakes. I remember being like, someone was meant to die in this book and no one died, and that really pissed me off. The next couple I have are like, I did not finish the entire series. So all the ones I've been talking about so far are like, I read these in its entirety. I read every single book in the series. This one, I'm like, I don't remember. So Rebel Belle was like a love child of the old school booktube. It had its heyday back in like 2015, 2016 maybe, and it did well. It was a pretty well received book, and I remember really liking the first book and generally liking the second book, but I never really got around to finishing the third book. I think by the time the third book had come out, I'd just kind of forgotten what happened in this book and never picked it back up. But I remember it was really cool. It was about paladins and like saving people and like being a knight, and the main girl, she was like gonna be prom queen and she was like really interesting and she was like such a type A kind of girl, and she ends up being a paladin. She had to serve and like protect this like really nerdy guy at her school, and she was like, what the hell's going on? Like, I don't love the fact that I have to do this and I have to like give up all my pageant dreams. Like, she was gonna be like the pageant queen. It was such a interesting look at popularity, I think, also. So I'm going to put this in All the Stories Are True. Even though I didn't finish it, I remember really liking it when I was reading it. I remember the main character being very interesting and well written. Now that I'm looking at the other things in All the Stories Are True, maybe this doesn't deserve to be there, but I'm going to put it in there anyway because I remember really liking it. Passenger was a story about like time travel. I can't remember exactly what it's about. I remember really loving it and then never really finishing the second book, specifically because I was like waiting for the library to like get it so that I could read it, and I never did, so I just like kind of gave up on it. But I remember at the time I really liked it, so I'm gonna put it at Bella Where Have You Been, Loca. It was about time traveling, and essentially there was like these 2 people who like met time traveling, and they were like time traveling together, and they were like falling in love, and that was really sweet. And I remember the chemistry being really good and the plot being really good, and I don't really remember too much else, which is a bad thing, but I'm gonna still put it on Bella Where Have You Been, Loca. Next thing is Ruby Red. Ruby Red suffers from the absolute travesty of the main character is somebody who wasn't equipped to essentially fill a role, but they got secret powers suddenly. Very much the same thing as like Shadow and Bone. I hate this trope, and I'm gonna put in, I was 14. I was peer pressured into reading this by the fact that other people on the internet had read this. That's not peer pressure, but you know, I was just like, you know, why not read this? It seems interesting. And I remember like at 13 years old, Ruby Red was like a cool name to me. And I was like, why not? And it was German. It was like a translated German novel about this girl who, I think again, time travels. Her sister or her cousin was like prepped for it their entire life, and instead it's like her, the main character, who's like not like other girls, and she's the one with the powers, and she doesn't know what she's doing, but she's got to like train really, really quickly so that she can go off and do her mission or whatever the hell. And you're just like, shut up. I hate when people train their entire lives and they get upstood. I don't know why. And that's never happened to me. This is not something that I specifically have ever had to go through, but for me, this is something that pisses me off constantly. The next thing is A Dark Shade of Magic. I read this recently, so this is like a recent read for me. I did not read this when I was like much younger, like most people, but I didn't really like this. I think again, because I read this when I was younger, like maybe if I read like Daughter of Smoke and Bone, I wouldn't like as much now, but I really didn't like this. I'm gonna put it in, well, I wasn't 14, but for some reason I might have to put it there. Actually, no, I'm gonna put it in Chin Up because I liked the premise, I liked the beginning of the story. I think the fact that the characters were very distinct, I liked the idea. The very ending of this book is just so bad. The Act 3 has no tension. It's just like, and then we were able to do this, and it was fine, and we just move, and everything's gonna be good. And it was just like, considering the fact that everyone really hypes up this book, and everyone's like, V. Schwartz, such a good writer, this was just such a disappointment in a way that I can't really fathom. Like, it was so not what I was expecting, especially when it got to the end. But again, I don't know. I don't know if I really like V. Schwab. I just think I read it because other people said that it was good, which is kind of the way I read a lot of these. A lot of these are like booktube picks from back in the day. So I was a big booktube warrior. Like, a lot of these people, you know, they're just like, oh, I got back into reading when I was 20. No. I've been reading. I've been on the internet, okay? And the next one is an absolute reminder of that, is Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. This was like a very strong Jessie the Reader pick, okay? I remember like exactly which booktubers at the time that were popular that like recommended this. Like, Daughter of Smoke and Bone was a big Caddy-tastic like choice, and this was a Jessie the Reader choice, and he really liked this. I didn't. Again, I think a big reason I didn't like this was again because I wasn't into period dramas until I was 19. Again, the same thing with Infernal Devices, where I was just like, I'm not into it yet. But I think I should maybe try and pick up Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children again, just because it could be up my street. It just wasn't when I was 15 years old. So maybe now is the way, because I still own the second book in the series and I never read it. It's one of the main TBR books that I have in my physical TBR, where I'm like, I'm never gonna read this, I don't think, but this is an interesting book regardless. I'm gonna put it in Chin Up though, because obviously I didn't even like it enough to continue reading. The guy who writes this is married to the woman who writes Shatami, and they were a really cute booktube couple back in the day. Like, as in, they would always go on the booktubers channels, and they used to be like a YA writer power couple, which is a very specific niche to be nominating, but they were the people. This one is Fallen. Fallen is a Fallen Angel Twilight knockoff, and I remember it being really, really bad. I remember reading it on holiday. Like, I took it with me on holiday, and I just remember it bad. It was just about this girl who was like not like other girls, but to be fair, she wasn't like other girls. She was like having visions of like a fallen angel, and I think she was a fallen angel, or like the love interest is a fallen angel, but I don't know why she was getting visions of him. But yeah, it was very odd. Like, it was in a like delinquent school, boarding school, and she was sent there, and so was this like other fallen angel guy. Like, whatever, like, good for them, but it was very bad and not very interesting. The next one is The Shadows Between Us. Okay, this was the beginning of the end of YA for me, because when I read this, I was kind of old. I was like probably 19. I think it was in my last year of uni, so it was like really late. At this point in my life, I was still reading YA. I just hadn't been like, oh, I hate this, I don't really want to. I haven't really seen too many things that I dislike about YA, but it was also because I wasn't reading that much. So when I got back into reading a bit of YA, starting with this, I was like, this is really bad. Because this is about an assassin who's out to like kill the king. She's not an assassin, but she's about to assassinate the king. And she's like, I'm gonna marry the king, and then I'm gonna kill him, and then I'm gonna kill the queen, and this is gonna be great. And then she just doesn't. And I hate when that happens. I hate when someone goes in to kill like a guy and they're like, I'm gonna make the most of the situation. I'm gonna kill them and then like become the queen and I'm gonna make this a better situation for myself. Or they're like killing the king out of like vengeance and they like fall in love with the king. I'm like, you fell in love with an oppressive state, babe. Like what the fuck is going on? Like let's stand up. Stand up for yourself. You can't like fall in love with the bodyguard or the chef or like one of the wait staff or one of the other guys at court. You had to marry the king. Like, I hate this. So this is going into I Was 14. Again, a lot of the I Was 14 lower ends is just stuff I read as an adult, but it was made for teenagers. Maybe that's saying something about the fact that I just shouldn't read things that weren't made for me, but whatever. I still think I'm allowed to judge them by my own metrics, even though they are not made for me, because I don't think children should be reading bad things either. And the last one I have on here is Shiver. Again, I've only read Shiver out of this series, and this was like an old werewolf story, and it was just not very good. And also, it was the first, like, Maggie Stiefvater story. Like, I never read The Raven Boys because of how bad this was. Like, I was like, I don't want to read any of her stuff because this sucked. But I maybe overjudged the Raven cycle, the Raven Boys, or the whatever the cycle is. I just didn't care for it, but I think maybe I would if I read it now. Or maybe if I read it when I was, like, 18. I think that's when I should have read it. But Shiver is going into I Was 14. And I was 14, I was actually 14. There's only 3 of these in my I Was 14 situation where I was actually indeed 14 years of age. Those are all of the YA fantasies that I read when I was both a child and not a child and kind of a child. As a teenager, as not a teenager, as kind of a young adult. And yeah, that's actually really well distributed, actually. There's a lot of stuff that was okay, a lot of stuff that was good, and there was quite a lot of stuff that was bad. So to be fair, a lot of the stuff that was bad are only like one book that I read. So I didn't read a lot of the series of the stuff that I thought was really bad. Like I stopped myself. Okay, Vampire Academy seems low here. Vampire Academy seems way lower than I perhaps have it in my head. I think I might put that up to Bella Where Have You Been Loca, because I did read all of it. I did have a good time reading it to the point where I like finished the series. We'll leave it there. That's my ranking. Hope you liked this video. Tell me if you think that my like rankings are correct. I would put things elsewhere, especially I guess with like the Mortal Instrument stuff, which is like very specific to me. To be fair, I rank them pretty well, I think. Aside from the Mortal Instruments, which is pretty high. I think for other people it's pretty low all of the time, but for me, I have personal commitment to that series. That means it's always going to be high. But otherwise, I think this is pretty normal and that I have good taste. But we'll see. Put it in the comments if you think I have bad taste. Put it in the comments if you think I have good taste. And also tell me what your opinion is on YA and reading YA now as an adult or like a young adult or like sort of a 20s adult, because it has been a really interesting journey of being somebody who read a lot of YA like this. This is only fantasy. Like I've got a whole other list of stuff that I read as well. Because like I was somebody who was reading all throughout my like teenage years. So it was a lot of stuff that I was reading where I was like, this is kind of bad. Like this was not good. And a lot of stuff that I was like, this is decent. Like it was something that I think holds up. When I read stuff now that's YA, I'm just like, wow, I'm like way more critical. It's just that I'm not going to read any of the stuff that I used to read because I'm just like, why would I reread that stuff when I would just read something new? Aside from like Daughter of Smoke and Bone, where I'm like, I think I might reread that at some point in my life, I think I've kind of just been like, this is a good lot. It was nice to read this, and I think I'm gonna like leave myself just the memories of this instead of rereading this stuff, because I always have more to read, and I don't know if I want to give my time to YA anymore, even though for a lot of my life I gave myself to YA quite readily. But yeah, have a great day. Thank you for watching. Maybe like the video if you liked it, and subscribe if you liked my videos and would want to watch another one. I'm probably going to make another one for my dystopia collection of all the ones I read throughout my years as well. So yeah, please subscribe if you want to watch that.